Hey everybody. Today is the start of some time off for me from work. It's become apparent to me that the subject matter of these videos depends greatly on how much time and solitude I have. This could really be a totally different channel if I didn't have a job and periodic companionship. This is to say that tonight's video comes from a feeling of expansiveness allowed by the dropping of the yoke of work and no need to get up early and no girlfriend to suck all the air out of the room. One of the recurring themes of this channel is that your view of reality has bearing on your state of being. The view that will set you free, in my experience, is not one that can be proven out by the scientific method. Not yet anyway. For the purposes of discovering your factory settings, it does not matter whether or not science can prove it. I know there are people who would say that where I'm talking from is as one who has played themselves. And even if that is true, I highly recommend it. But it does feel like the way behind was narrow and perilous. In his book, How to Know Higher Worlds, Rudolf Steiner makes reference to an abyss with a guardian that must be overcome. He describes this being in literal terms as something hideous, and that when it's overcome, then karma is experienced directly as opposed to being taken on by this thing. Maybe it's like a portrait of Dorian Gray. I've not encountered such a thing as this. But the thing that must be overcome could well have manifested to him as such. For indeed, there is something. Carlos Castaneda describes it as a flyer or the parasite in his books on the Yaqui way of knowledge. And I think it's described in the Metallica song, Sad But True, which I've mentioned before. This thing is a construct made from impressions in consciousness, or perhaps it uses those as a skin, collecting memories and wearing them to create the impression of being the one that observes them. The subtle counterpart to the gross form that projects the world into awareness, into this non-physical realm of awareness. What observes this conceptual being that captures the energy that follows attention and transmutes it to its own vibrational level is not something that can be observed. So what observes is not observable, not something that appears in awareness. It is observing, and it is believing. It believes everything it sees. So long as that subtle construct has not revealed its non-self nature to what's aware of it, there will be belief that this thing warrants attention, and that attention is the feeding tube. In J.R.R. Tolkien's cosmology, I think he's described this in the Silmarillion, the supreme being, Eru Ilúvatar, projects the universe into existence like music, and his servants, the Valar, do their part for each aspect of his world. But Morgoth, who is the greatest among the Valar, creates a song that's dissonant. It is like the shadow by which the world knows how to value light. That's what this thing is. This thing that causes suffering, this thing that transmutes the energy that follows attention into that of suffering. It's the contrast. Liberation can be found in the view that what appears in awareness as a world is actually a projection that is the product of divine will, as in Tolkien's universe. The only thing in this universe that does not move is the space in which it all appears. Everything is some vibration in the space, and things seem real relative to each other due to some kind of dissonance that precludes their occupation of the same space. Unless their structure allows for solubility, they can't appear to be in the same space. So the idea that something is real is really just an idea. The things we see are mostly space at the atomic level. And while space is nothing, it is not inert. It has all potentiality. It just depends on the will that resonates through it to make reality what it is. Anything can appear in the space. I have referred to the truth as being the present, but what appears in the present is a movement within the truth in this moment that's a product of divine will. Because the truth is unchanging, and the only thing that is unchanging is the space through which everything that appears does so as a vibration through that space. It's kind of like string theory. Please bear in mind that I'm not asserting that what I'm saying is provable or how the mechanics of the universe actually are. Only that having this view can destroy your relational thinking in a way that allows for a stillness in which another facet of perception will appear. So it's like we're talking about string theory. This is all a projection within a matrix, and you are that space through which all this moves. That space is aware of everything that moves through it, though not locally and everywhere, but rather as a projection into what, compared to our reality, is a non-physical space, the space of imagination, of dreams. The space perceives what's moving through it through the projection of what's perceived through the senses. So the form arises from the divine will, and that form projects into awareness a rendering of that will. So you've probably heard it said that the universe observes itself. If you really think about it, what is perceived in life is only a projection into the non-physical space of imagination. Eastern traditions talk of higher states of being than the default roller coaster of suffering and pleasure. Buddhism attributes suffering to desire, but it also names ignorance as a prerequisite for that. There must be something for which to suffer and fear and desire. There must be something at stake for there to be suffering, or else it's like playing poker with play money. That thing that makes it all real is body identification. In Hinduism, there are described instances where the gods have come to earth in fleshly bodies, but one of the qualities of flesh is that it makes them forget who they are. In this sense, incarnated gods and mortals are the same. They both suffer ignorance. The space that perceives the projection into awareness, facilitated by the food body, it believes everything it sees. And so it perceives the feelings of a form that reacts to phenomena as if everything is at stake, because that form exists in a changeful realm where all is impermanent. It exists in a realm that is like an ocean, the waves through which move in enough directions to create the appearance of heterogeneity. But it is all one thing, vibrating and moving to create the appearance. It is God's dream. It's like the concept I've mentioned before from H.P. Lovecraft of Azathoth, the idiot god that dreams the reality we experience. What you take yourself to be is a character in that dream. The sense in which you were made in God's image is not in the physical one, but rather in being what is aware. In liberation, the mind has configured itself in a way that no longer appears to be a self to what's aware of it. The jiva no longer holds belief that colors its energy body with the reactions to thoughts and circumstances. It projects a belief in being what's aware to awareness, and that awareness believes that realization. And in such is a stillness of the spiritual heart, and the truth that unchanging space reflects truly from the spiritual heart as a mirror, and the reflection in that mirror is not visible but rather palpable. Neem Karoli Baba said, "Cleanse the mirror of your heart and you will see God." The stillness is caused by a breaking of relational thinking. The root of the ego, which is the thought I, has been exposed as nothing but a thought which serves as an agent to facilitate relational thinking in the world of apparent duality. Instead of the ego being attacked in the upper branches, which is futile, to try to stop thoughts by taking them on directly. It's like trying to cut a weed from the green part. It's just going to keep growing back. Instead, to cut the roots, the surrendering of the I thought from which all those branches of the construct grow, surrendering that I back to its source in the spiritual heart from which it arose in the child before words, that causes the whole egoic tree to eventually die, because there's no believing that one is something to relate to those thoughts. There's no belief in being the subject of those thoughts. So they just don't get visited by attention. They don't have the teeth of identity. There's no sense in being something they relate to. What's been described thus far would be related to view, the right view that allows for peace. And that is the one that sees the non-self nature of what appears in awareness, and as a result has no fear. And in that absence of fear is the perception of love, which doesn't have to have a cause. It just is. It's always there. It's just obscured by the feelings that stem from relational thinking, which is caused by ignorance. Many of the spiritual practices that support this amount to being able to concentrate attention into non-relational things, which precludes proliferation, because these non-relational feelings, don't have the hooks of identity that thoughts do. The perceiving of non-relational things is done through feeling, but it's a feeling that doesn't entail reacting, because a reaction presupposes identification with a stakeholder on whose behalf that reaction is done. The sense in which people think this is just playing oneself is that it seems like a cultivated dissociation. But in my experience, there's a difference. It's more like a cultivated dispassion. Just because there's not an unconscious belief in being a composite of subtle and gross forms doesn't mean that the practical cognition required to keep them going goes away. There's no Advaita zombie apocalypse, although it is possible for someone to become a mast, M-A-S-T. That is something that Meher Baba talked about. I can only speak of this in vagaries because it's something I heard either on the radio or some Dhamma talk or both. But it was about brain studies that show certain ways in which monks and psychopaths overlap. Like their brains have similar kinds of non-reacting in brain scans. But obviously monks and psychopaths are not the same, and the difference is desire. The psychopath has an inner movie playing like everyone else, in which there is a character that wants things to happen a certain way. And there's a belief in being one to win and lose, but physiologically things don't work as normal in the psychopath. Whereas a monk doesn't react because there's not a sense of being one to win and lose, and they have, through spiritual practice, shaped their neural pathways. I guess that's enough spirituality for now. I wanted to talk about corruption for a little bit, because that really is the facilitator of the situation in which we find ourselves. Were it not for a whole bunch of weak but highly positioned individuals who've come under undue influence, we could probably have a decent civilization. Corruption expands the scope of what can be purchased with money to things that shouldn't be purchased with money, such as people and the public trust. Corruption is what gives money extra power, and so those who have money but want power seek to corrupt. It is ideal for a person who's good at a certain thing if one's ability in that thing becomes the deciding factor in many of life's intersections. So people steer things to what favors them. Like if I'm a professional arm wrestler, I would be okay with every controversy I'm in being settled with an arm wrestling match. This is an incentive for the wealthy to encourage corruption because it makes more and more things about money, even beyond the politicians themselves who are purchased. Through lawlessness, more things can be purchased. Through shifting the Overton window, more things can be purchased. Corruption can only happen when those who are targeted by it take the bait that is offered. It could be a direct bribe, or the promise of opportunity in some other realm, such as business for oneself or one's family or cronies, or various kinds of fringe benefits, like the use of property and vehicles, such as planes and boats. A society is doomed when so many of its politicians are owned by stakeholders whose interests run counter to the people's. Then a non-corrupt candidate can't even get on the ballot. You only get to vote who gets nominated, and the money decides the contest before the contest. It seems as if this is the case in the West, that a majority of the politicians are owned by moneyed interest or globalist NGOs or are controlled by intelligence agencies. One additional thing I wanted to mention is about current events, and the analogy I would use is like if you have a jar of popcorn kernels, right? Whenever you pop popcorn, there's always like some that are going to be the first to pop. So like if you could extract those and concentrate them, you could, theoretically have quick popping popcorn. But people are the same way, like not all the people are going to react at the same time. Some are going to react early or in a way, that's violent. So what's happening now is there's a bunch of people who are having these consequences. And those people are the popcorn kernels that pop first and most extremely. And there's thousands of them. And they are now being subjected to heat. So I would expect there to be an escalation of violence as this particular subset of people who have been called out for extreme behavior are experiencing the destruction of their lives through job loss and loss of opportunities. They are outliers. They gave an outlier reaction. That was the selection process that put them in this. And there's several thousand of them. So yes, I expect some of them to act out. That's all for now.